Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host here, and my guest today comes from Boston as well, Thea Colman. Hi, Thea.
Hi.
So you're also known as a BabyCocktails, and
Yes.
I'd like you to tell me like how that became a name, because I feel like that's how your story starts.
Yeah, so I used to have a corporate career. I spent about 10 years in advertising agencies. And when my first baby was born, it became apparent that my husband did the same thing that I did. And we traveled a lot. We had really crazy, unpredictable hours. One of us had to quit. The two of us couldn't both do the same thing anymore. So it was the 80s. He got paid a lot more for doing the same thing as I did. So I quit. And then I was home alone with an infant. And I was lucky enough to be in a neighborhood with a lot of other women who had kind of done the same thing as me, where we used to have careers and jobs. And here we were doing this kind of new thing. And around 4 o'clock in the afternoon was when we would all start to lose it. You know, like it had been a long day. The baby was crying. You were bored. You hadn't used your brain all day. And we lived on a long street kind of all in a row. So what we would start to do was have cocktails, 4 o'clock to like 6 o'clock. We'd meet at one house or the other. We'd throw all the babies kind of in the middle of the floor. We'd hang out, and we called them baby cocktails. There was a friend of mine who was I'm really into thrift stores and thrift shopping, and my friend was too. And she was also a little bit crafty at the same time. And we had this idea that we were going to take the babies, go to thrift stores, buy stuff, doctor it up, like, I don't know, add appliques or sleeves or patchwork or whatever. And then we were going to go to local stores and like sell this brand of baby gear that we had come up with. And that was going to be called, we were going to call this little company of ours Baby Cocktails. So early on, I got the URL for that. And that was in the very, very beginning of blogging. So I started to blog under the name Baby Cocktails. And it was most like, if you go back to 2007, the stuff that I wrote about is ridiculous. It's like I was unraveling thrift store sweaters and like playing with all kinds of weird little things, but I was building a little audience at the same time. And what ended up happening with the Baby Cocktails idea is literally nothing. We never did a thing. We never even, like, we'd go to thrift stores all the time. We never even bought an item of baby clothes. But I had the name, I had the blog, and when I started knitting, the blog kind of moved to knitting. And I wasn't doing it professionally, but by the time my friends talked me into publishing my first design, I already had this name and this blog, and I don't know, a couple hundred people maybe followed me. It seemed like a silly thing to get rid of because it was such an unusual word. And right. Since I came from an ad agency, I kind of understood the value of that word. And so I just kind of kept going with Baby Cocktails. Also, more so then, less so now, there would be really long stretches between publishing because I had 100 other things to do. I wasn't as fast at doing it or anything. And so having cocktails to talk about kind of filled the holes between designs and gave people a reason to kind of talk to me, or me a reason to talk to them. The cocktail angle also means that all of my alcohol purchases are tax deductible and have been, like, for the last 12 years, which is kind of nice. And it kind of went from there. Right. The other reason, which I've told the story in a couple of interviews before, is that when I did think about using my name at the time, there was a porn star by the name of Thea Colman. And in the early days, if you used to Google my name, it would be all her, and then like a picture of some yarn, and then like more of her, and then a picture of some yarn. She's not modeling anymore, and like the knitters have literally taken over. There was a tipping point a while ago where you would see way less of her and more of the yarn, but that was confusing for some people. Someone came up and told me about it in a playground once. They were like, I found out. And I'm like, you found out what? And she's like, it's okay, I won't tell anybody. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? She's like, I found your Playboy photos. And I was like, there are literally no Playboy photos of me. And she's like, I didn't click through. I was like, if you had clicked through, you would have seen. But anyway, so yeah, I avoided the porn star. I kept the blog. I had the cocktails.
Well, before all that though, how did you discover knitting for yourself? Like, how did knitting happen to be in your life?
My grandma used to knit, and she taught me a little bit. I used to go to Fort Lauderdale to her condo, like the traditional 1970s grandma down there. And when it wasn't all kids swim and we weren't allowed in the water, we'd sit on the side of the pool and she showed me. I didn't really do anything with it until high school. I took another class at a store in the town I grew up in, and I made myself a sweater then. I still remember what it looks like. It was an old Katya brochure, and it had little orange stripes on it. It was a tee. And then I didn't pick it up again until I had kids.
Was it like almost like a muscle memory when you did pick it up?
My first few things are kind of rough. not really good, but like, yeah, I mean, it probably came, I don't remember, to be honest. I think it came back pretty fast, but I wouldn't say it was an immediate pick it up. Like, I still have a baby blanket, which I think was the first thing I knit for my daughter, my older daughter. I got a thick woolly lamb's pride worsted and made a baby blanket out of that. Like, stupid, like that's a terrible decision, first of all. It's a really heavy, scratchy, woolly yarn, and I made her a baby blanket.
Well, how were you learning? Like back then, there was no really YouTube. Like, how did you learn? Like,
so I bought books, or I went to the library. Like, that's something that actually I find really interesting now. I would never have thought to ask someone to do something the way people do now. I used to go find books and sit there and practice with the picture of the book. I also I went to a yarn store back then too. I got lessons when I was in high school, and then after the Lamb's Pride thing, there was a yarn store in Lexington. I don't know where you are in Boston.
Newton.
Okay, so in Lexington there was a yarn store, and there was a really wonderful lady there named Pat who was super helpful if you had questions. I'm forgetting the name of the store now. It had 2 stories. Anyone who's local is going to know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I think I might have asked questions too of the woman in the yarn store. And then I got books out from the library, and the first book I bought in this rendition of my knitting life was the Big Vogue Knitting Manual. Mm-hmm. And then I think I might have had my second baby by the time I started going to my first knitting group as an adult. But I went to a knitting group in Brookline that met at the Brookline Booksmith. And then we could all ask each other questions there. But by then I had remembered how to do things.
So you said that like a friend of yours convinced you to publish your first pattern. What was that decision like for you to like actually show the world, tell the world, okay, I'm a designer, here's my pattern?
I don't think I thought about it in those terms. I was in this knitting group in Brookline, and there were a few people there that were pretty accomplished. One, her name was Allison, and she had published a book of Harry Potter designs, maybe. Another's name was Colleen, and she had a knit pattern in Interweave. A friend of mine, Carol, has knit everything ever published and was just a fantastically talented knitter. There were a couple other people like that really like knew what they were doing. And I was always changing my patterns around. Like I would pull up a pattern from, I don't know, Interweave or something, or Rowan that was really simple, and I would do stuff to it. And so one of them was like, you're already designing, like you should just write it up and see what happens. A friend of mine had opened a small yarn shop in a nearby town in Arlington, and I wrote up a couple of hat patterns that we sold for free in her store. I mean, maybe like 3 people bought them, but I went through the exercise of writing them up. And then I knit a really simple cardigan. It was, I called it the golden vintage cardigan because back then I wasn't naming things after drinks. I was just naming them. And it was a really, really simple cardigan and I wrote it up and I don't know, people bought it. I didn't think it was going to be a career. I thought it was going to be like shoe money. You know, like if you want to get a pair of shoes, you don't have to feel bad until I went back to advertising.
What was like writing that pattern? Like, was it easy for you? Was it intuitive? Was it like, I have no idea what I'm doing? Because cardigans are not easy. Like you have to grade.
Well, so the way I cook is I'll open like 10 cookbooks and take pieces and bits from. So I remember in the early days, what I would do is I would find a garment or a pattern with similar dimensions, because that was always the part that I wasn't 100% sure about. You have that big, I'm forgetting, it's like the Knitting Association, you know, the guidelines that say that this is the range, but I never actually 100% agreed with their range anyways. So I would always be like, all right, I want my armholes to be between 7 and 11 inches wide. And, you know, I'm going to grade it in there. And then I kind of judged everything a little bit until I got the feel for it. And the truth is, my first few patterns, they're not for sale anymore. Like I have taken them off of Ravelry and I don't have them on my website because I'm not confident in the sizing. Right. But I kind of learned as I went along. And back then, there weren't as many people doing it. And I don't think people were as knowledgeable and careful about calling us on what it was that we were doing as we were learning. If you look at all the people that knit those first couple patterns, they look fine. You know, they weren't terrible. They didn't fit badly, but I look at mine and I'm like, I don't like the way the armhole sits or the neckline didn't have a nice scoop to it. But yeah, I would just kind of look at a lot of resources and then I would come to a middle point where I was happy. And then once I knew my dimensions, writing the pattern was always easy for me because that's just an Excel chart and math and figuring out where motifs go in that math. But I think the hardest part was figuring out what sizing needed to look like. I know some people who do this came from a design background. I didn't. I was shooting television commercials. So I just knew what I liked and how I liked things to fit. I would sometimes, actually, I remember once I went to a store and there was a sweater in a shape that I liked. And I bought one of each size and I measured them and then I returned them. Because I was just kind of like, okay, if this is a small, a medium, and a large, like, here's the range.
Right. Well,
I guess those are.
Do you feel like people who want to get into design career or any sort of business, and they hesitant because they're like, well, I don't know yet everything that I need to know. Like, what would be your advice? To just jump in and figure it out as you go, or educate yourself first until you're very confident and then do that? Like, what's your gut feeling on that?
Well, so this is a very unique business because the startup costs are minimal. I can do it from my house. I still don't have a staff, you know, I buy some yarn. So I think if you're looking at knitwear design, you can jump in as long as you're confident that whatever you're going to put out is something that you want to attach your name to. I don't think that's true of every, of a lot of other things, but this was a very easy, it was a low risk proposition, right? I was home anyways. I was knitting anyways. Baby was sleeping. I could write things up on my computer in my spare time. It was an excuse to hang out with my friends. My friends have always been my models and continue to be. My friend is actually I do have one friend that helps me out with stuff right now because I just don't have the bandwidth to do everything and still manage to design. So she gives me a few hours a week to help answer questions and deal with some tech stuff and stuff that I don't have time for. But she's also a friend, and talking to her is an excuse to interact with a friend during the day, you know? Right.
Well, I watched one of your Instagram lives and you were talking about a red sweater that you were in the process of designing, and you were like, okay, like this is what it looks like, but I'm gonna redo this and that and all of that, and it's gonna be in this color.
Yep.
Is that often happens when you do something? Like how often do you redesign things? Like how often are you dissatisfied with it?
Not at all. Like that's new for me. This sort of walking down memory lane is kind of new for me. And as I'm doing it, I'm looking at that sweater particularly, I always really liked, but I don't, it's not perfect and I want it to be. So I was like, I have yarn, I can do this. I want to, what I have been doing recently is going back through a lot of my old designs that people still want to buy. Like I think I just counted 283 designs on Rav. So that doesn't include things that were elsewhere. And a lot of them, you know, because there's so many, no one pays attention to anymore, but there are some that people pay attention to. And I was realizing some of my very popular designs are really old, which means they were written without the amount of experience that I have now. They don't have the amount of detail. I used to do my own little hand-drawn schematics. They're terrible little drawings with a pencil. You know, when we first started, no one in the US even cared about whether we had centimeters. So I've been going back over the last few years and picking patterns that I know people still purchase and updating those. And I think that was kind of the natural progression into now I'm looking at my entire repertoire month by month. I imagine there's going to be a couple more that I like that I'm like, you know, I could play with this again and make it better. But it's not that I'm not always 100% intentional. Like it's a creative business. So if something all of a sudden feels like that's what wants to be on my needles next, it's lovely to have the bandwidth to be like, that's what's going to go on my needles next.
Well, so, I mean, your designs are like famous for very complicated cable work. They like all of them have this like hard to do kind of look.
Oh, you think so?
Well, I mean, I'm just like,
but the truth is, and a lot, if you look at what a lot of my knitters say, I do find stuff that looks harder than it is. And almost everything that I design has a rhythm to it that's easier to find than you think in terms of the cables. Remember, I'm drinking while I'm knitting. It can't be that hard.
My question about it though, like when you design, and as you mentioned, you have 283 designs out there already. Is it difficult to come up with like another way of cables and another pattern that's going to use cables? And, you know, like how like that process work? Like how much creativity there versus like it's a business and I have to publish something. This is what people expect from me. This is what's popular. So let me go through the dictionary and find another cable and put it on another sweater. Like how do you work? How is your process?
So that's actually, I think, my biggest struggle, because I try very, very hard not to design something that looks like something else that either I've done or that somebody else has done. I think it's really important that we respect the other designers out there. You know, I've heard people say, oh, you just changed 3 things on someone else's design and it's yours. And I think that's bullshit. I think that if you're really going to be creative, figure something else out. But I've actually, over the years, it's getting harder for me to come up with new stuff, because I'm like, oh, in fact, for Rhinebeck this year, I was totally playing with an idea. And only yesterday I was like, you know what, this reminds me of a sweater of my Fernet Branca sweater. And so I took the whole design and ripped it out. And now I'm at square one again. Not because I didn't like the way that the cable looked in the yarn, and not because I didn't like the sweater I was coming up with, but because all of a sudden it reminded me of something that I did before. So that is actually something that is increasingly difficult for me. But I just took an old cable that I used in my Irish coffee sweater, which was done way, way, way back, and put it on another sweater in a completely different way. And I'm going to release that this fall. So I don't know if there's a hard and fast answer, but like that is something that I'm incredibly conscious of and work really hard not to do. And then the other thing is, like, you've mentioned cables, but the truth is I don't only design cables, right? And that is a little bit of a hurdle for me, because sometimes I think, well, people really don't want X or Y or Z from me. But I designed a sweater a few years ago called Lilette, and it's a simple stockinette pullover with lace at the collar. And that's one of my most popular sweaters right now.
Right.
So I
Well, I
think,
mean, how much do you worry about what people expect from you or what people want from you? How much of it is like a pressure on you that, okay, I'm a knitwear designer, so I have to design certain amount of knitwear designs per year. Like I have to publish something every month, every 2 months. I don't know, like what's your schedule?
yeah,
How
I'm
much
in the middle of that right now, because so here's where here's where I am, like at this moment in time. I was for a lot of years trying to put out at least 2 things a month. I've been paying the college tuitions of my kids. I do pay the bills around here. This is not an extra career. And if I don't make a certain amount of money, then I need to figure something else out to do. So yeah, so that has absolutely been I don't know, concern. But the thing is, I'm starting to realize that putting out more doesn't mean more people buy stuff, because if I put out too much, they're still working on the last thing that I put out. Like I think I have a core audience of people that knit my things. I see the same names coming up again and again and again. And then other people definitely pop in. There's new names, there's some followers, whatever. But I would guess that the bulk of my sales come from a lot of repeat knitters. And if they're still working on last month's cabled sweater and I put 3 things out in the next month, they're going to forget about those 3 things by the time I put out the next thing. So life this year has made me slow down anyways. There's a lot of things going on in my personal world that mean that I'm going to do less this year. And so I'll put that theory to the test. Because I'm not putting out half as much stuff as I usually would for fall right now. And I don't have the bandwidth to even, it's not an option for me right now. So we'll see how it works.
I mean,
and I'm
like,
also promoting old things, hoping that that'll fill in the blanks, but.
I mean, since you have the experience in marketing, do you feel like it's coming handy with how you grow your audience, how you like grow your Instagram following, how you grow?
Yes and no, because my advertising agency experience was in the 1990s, and the internet is a whole like that. My experience in the corporate world had nothing to do with the internet and absolutely nothing to do with things like Instagram. But I got to say, I was visiting. One of the things that I love about this business is the other people that do what I do and how we all are really supportive of each other. And I went away with a bunch of friends this summer who are industry people, and they were all saying, "Got to put some video on your Instagram." Like that's why I did what I started doing this
Right.
monthly recap that I'm going to be doing. And I got to say, in just 2 videos, my Instagram went from them hiding all of my stuff to I have all these new followers, and all of my engagement with people has gone way up. So I can tell the video makes a difference. So I'm going to keep doing them. But in the way I think about other stuff, I think it's helpful. Yeah.
I mean, are you ever frustrated with that? Because, you know, you are a talented designer and this is your job, right? To design. But meanwhile, you have to advertise yourself. You have to promote yourself. You have to find followers. You have to explain people like why they have to buy your stuff versus their stuff, all these things. Like, does it ever frustrate you?
I think that that's the reality of owning your own teeny tiny business. like whether I'm knitting or making earrings or sewing, or if I was a dog trainer, you know, like unless I hire a staff, it's all going to be me no matter what. I think I'm actually really lucky to do what I do. It's been a little less fun the last few years because of the pandemic,
Right.
but I'm willing to take all that with the fact that I spend my days in yarn and clothing and creativity, which I really like. And soon I'll get back to spending time with all of the people that I really, really love.
Well, you've been teaching also classes, right?
Less so. I used to teach some. I don't really teach so much as I did workshops. That's not where my strength is. And teaching, again, tiny, tiny business. When I'm teaching, I'm not designing. And teaching a class, I might make a few $100 in a weekend. Designing a pattern, that continues to support me for a very long time. So teaching cuts into my actual business.
Right.
And I used to teach in order to travel. Like almost everything I've said yes to in terms of teaching involved a place I want to go and people I want to go there with. And that just hasn't happened in a long time. So I've stepped away from that. I'll still teach every once in a while when the stars align and everything's perfect, but that's not my focus. And I think like yarn stores and stuff, that's where people should go to ask a lot of their questions instead of to me and to other designers who love teaching and are fantastic at it.
Well, what's your relationship with other designers? Like, do you see them as your colleagues? Do you see them as your competition? Do you see, like, there are some big popular names that you see on Ravelry's top 10 lists every day, and then, you know, it's like, is it difficult to break into that? Do you feel like one of the guys? Like, what's your feeling?
So I don't see anybody as competition. I think I said a long time ago in a different interview, the example of there were 6 or 7 of us, all different industry people, not all designers, but we all have different points of view and we all specialize kind of in different types of things. And we were all staying in a house together. And the woman who was talking to me asked me a similar question. And I was like, you could give all 6 of us the same cable pattern and the same yarn, and you would get 6 incredibly different sweaters or scarves or hats, or probably, like, we all have our strengths and we all have our points of view. And I think that the phrase is like a strong current floats all boats. And if you've seen my account for years, I'm forever talking about what the other women that I know are publishing. Like I'm not going to not shine a spotlight on someone else because I think they're my competition. I don't. That said, it is hard to pop through. And I've had this conversation, like there are some designers who they're very talented, but the minute they post something, everybody else is eclipsed for the day. And I always I had a friend who worked at Brooklyn Tweed, and I would say, tell me when you're going to publish the next collection, because I don't want to publish during that week. You know, like that's sort of how I feel about the competition. Like, I just don't want to time things wrong or do things wrong so that I lose my chance. Or I don't want, like, I've had a number of times where I've worked on something and a friend of mine who is a designer has a similar aesthetic to me, and we'll talk to each other on the phone, and I'll be like, oh, I'm working on this, like, what do you think? And she'll be like, Jesus Christ, and she'll have the same cable on her sweater, and I'll be like, it's okay, you know, we'll decide. I'll work on it, or you'll work on it, or we'll release at different times. Recently there's a sweater I'm about to release, and Laura Chow, Cosmic Pluto, just released something using the same stitch pattern. And when I saw it she saw my thing on Instagram and wrote to me and was like, hey, and I wrote to her and was like, well, what are you doing? Let's just make sure that our 2 designs are very different. And we talk to each other and they are very different, and it's fine. But I just think we can all exist in that way. And the other part of the question that you asked is like how I think of them. Some of my closest friends are other knitwear designers. And I find them inspiring and amazing and strong. And they're the kind of people I want in my life. They're the kind of people I want my daughters seeing me hang out with.
Right.
Like, they are confident and strong and creative. And I think the other women in this industry are mostly fantastic. So,
well, talking of being strong and self-assured, do you ever doubt yourself? Do you ever feel like, why did I not go back to the advertising industry? Why did I
no, not that. I thought you were gonna be like, did you ever doubt yourself? Like, I'm nodding because I'm like, yeah, because some sweaters, they're done and they don't do what I thought they do, or you know, I'm like, what did I get wrong on that one? I really thought that was going to be a popular design, and it's not. I definitely doubt myself that way. Like, I liked it. I don't know why you guys didn't buy it. Do I ever think I should have done something else or stayed in advertising? I mean, there's times I miss it. I was in a really fun part of the business. But no, I don't, this is way better than corporate America for me and for my family. Like, I was working in a baby pool before doing this. Like, you don't really get to do that in a lot of other industries.
Right. Well, you mentioned Rhinebeck. What are the festivals like for you? Like, when you go there, is that like your celebrity moment? Is it the conversation starter? Is it place for inspirations?
It's always a place for inspiration. It's always a place to talk to both other designers that I wouldn't see, and the knitters that I know from the internet, or to, like, there's nothing better than walking down the whatever pathway and seeing someone wearing your sweater. Like, that is the best feeling in the world. It just makes you want to go home and design more stuff. It's absolutely awesome. And it's whether I'm a celebrity or not, I fly under the radar a lot. Also, I'm sometimes around people who are way more well-known than me, which makes it really easy to fade into the background, and I don't mind that. I also I'm not my own model. If you notice, most of the people that are the most famous are their own models all the time. So, and it depends on the festival. I've gone to a lot of festivals where people have come up to me and talked to me and then walked away, and they'll be wearing something that I designed, but they won't even know that they talked to me. And that's fine by me too.
Do you remember first time when you saw somebody wearing one of your designs?
Yeah, I was at New Hampshire Sheep and Wool. Her name, I believe, was Norma. She had blonde hair, and she's a court stenographer. And she was wearing a red version of my golden vintage cardigan. And I continued to follow her on social media for a while. Back then we were blogging, and there was no Instagram. It was blogs and Ravelry, and maybe Knitty. We used to all talk to each other on Knitty. But it was Norma's sweater was the first one. And she looked great in it. And it was a beautiful sweater. And I was like, oh, like, it made me really happy.
Well, when you talk about 283 designs that are published on Ravelry alone, do you remember all of them? Like, do you remember designing all of them?
Well, I'm 55 years old, so I don't remember a lot of anything anymore. But yeah, I mean, the name might not come to me right away, but I will in a few minutes time be able to say, yes, that's the name. Yes, it's the yarn that I made that in. I liked it. I didn't like it, you know, whatever. And they were almost all the sweaters were still here in my house until earlier this year to last year. I started realizing that the ones I don't wear should be getting gifted. So I've spent the last few years giving a lot of my sweaters away to, I'd say there's about 10 to 12 people in my life that own multiples of my stuff right now.
Is like, how much of your wardrobe, and I don't mean right now because it's 93 degrees outside, but like usually made by you?
Well, I'm a terrible sewer, so it's only knitting. I have a sewing machine. I really want to be sewing. I want to be better at it. I've taken a couple classes at my local yarn store, Gather Here. But I don't really have the time for it. And it requires a level of like,
Precision.
I don't know, perfection and precision that I'm just awful at it. I've got 2 dresses that need to be hemmed in a pile over there. And I'm really getting to the point where I'm just going to take them to a seamstress and pay money to get my stuff hemmed, which is absolutely pathetic because I should be able to hem a goddamn dress. I'm sorry, I swear. I should be able to hem a dress, but I'm not. I'd
But
say in
you
the winter,
wear
I wear
like all your needs.
yeah, I wear it. So yeah, in the winter, on any given day, I am probably wearing a sweater. If I'm outdoors, I am probably wearing a shawl and a hat also. I don't tend to wear my gloves all the time because I don't want to ruin them. And my life is not I'm not like a lady who lunches kind of thing. Like I'm usually in the woods walking with my dog, picking up things that are gross and getting like in the summer, like you know, I'm not someone who can take really good care of my mitts, so I don't wear them as much. But if I am going into the city for dinner or doing something that, you know, is not potentially going to ruin my gloves, I wear those too.
Well, you mentioned somewhere that like every Wednesday you're busy doing something for the community and you've been doing it for years. Why is it important for you? Like, why did you decide to then do that?
God, I've been volunteering my whole life. I candy striped when I was in high school and did this drunk driving thing. I was a big brother, big sister tutor. And before I was had kids, I did Habitat for Humanity in San Francisco. I think if everybody just pitched in and did one thing, we could cover everything. I've always done it. And there are times in my life when I couldn't, but then as soon as I hit another time in my life when I could, and I try and do things consistently. Like I don't just do a volunteer thing once and then not do it again. This I've been doing for 12 years. It's an organization called Cradles to Crayons. I'm sure you've heard of it if you're in Newton. And when my kids were little, we looked for things that we could do where they would start to be able to realize their privilege in the world and like, you know, do something to make things better. And I understand why, but it's really, really hard to find a place where you can bring a child consistently and have them help where they actually will help. And Cradles used to let the kids come and they would quality test the books and toys that came through. So a bunch of us went with our kids when they were super little. And then I kept going when they were in school with a friend of mine who used to lead a group. Because it's like there's different stations and a person who's a volunteer leads a group of other volunteers who come just for the day to do different tasks. So she used to do that and I would help her. And then she moved on. She now works for an organization that does similar stuff for adults. And I took her spot. And I've been leading the groups every Wednesday morning ever since. You come when they can. In fact, Zoe's been coming with me every Wednesday this summer. And my older daughter, Maya, because of COVID, couldn't get a job doing what she wanted to do for a museum. She wants to do community organization and outreach for museums. And she expanded her search to nonprofits, and Cradles needed a community organization and outreach person. And because she'd been going there for 20 years of her life, she got the job. So she works there. I honestly feel like I have everything I need. I have a job that allows me the time to do more, and I should.
Do you feel like you're still learning something new about knitting?
Right now, not as much as I'd like to. Again, it goes back to the question you said before about that balance between putting out things that are new and creative versus paying the bills and running your business. Like for me to learn something new, I would love to learn brioche. I would love to knit all the shawls. But the thing that comes to me easily and the thing that I can get on my needles and the thing that's going to do what I want it to do in a predictable way needs to be the thing that gets on my needles. Because there is that constant, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? The demand, the constant demand that like I have to do the next thing.
Right. Tell me
So.
about your yarn choices, because like I notice you sort of gravitate towards like sustainable yarn, local yarn, something more of a like natural colors. Tell me, like, what's your choices usually like?
My choices are often based on, I do like to support small businesses. I have learned through the years that I can design for a giant company like Cascade, but they don't need me. So they don't care and they're not going to promote me and I'm not going to do any good for them. Right. But if I design for a small farm, my design might help them get through the winter and they care that I designed in their yarn. And over the years, I've come to know a lot of these people and I love them. And there's nothing that makes me happier than knowing that like this yarn here will be something soon. And it's by Tammy of Wing and a Prayer Farm. And if you know Tammy, she's the most charming and hardworking woman in the world. So if I can make something out of this and help Tammy in her business, and it's gorgeous. It's like deep brown and a little bit sheepy, and it's got a Tweedy little heather in it. And she knows who the sheep are that came from. Like that's special. That's much different than pulling a skein of Cascade off a shelf. This is what I'm hoping to make my Rhinebeck sweater out of, should it all come together the way it's supposed to. And it's from Salkill Farm, which is right near Rhinebeck, New York. And to me, I really love having a Rhinebeck sweater from an actual farm because it's supposed to be a sheep and wool festival that's all about those farms.
Right.
So I've tried every year to do something that at least came from a small farm, whether it's the farm itself that produces the yarn or whether it's a yarn company that gets yarn from a smaller farm. I just feel like that's important. I don't know. I do have like my little moral soapboxes when it comes to my business because I want to feel good about what I'm doing. And that allows me to.
I mean, is there like particular yarn that you keep coming back to just because you love the way it shows stitches, it's drapes?
Yes. I think my two favorite yarns right now for stitch definition would be Magpie Fibers Nest Worsted. That stuff is absolutely beautiful and takes a stitch like nobody's business. Durirum Natura's Gillette. I don't know how to pronounce it. Gilliatt. It's that worsted. It's just beautiful. I love, well, I could go on a list. I won't like, I could go. But like, I like it. I love a worsted weight. That's really my happy spot. My fingers don't like thin yarn. And if someone ever gives me a fingering or a sport for me to work on, chances are I get a little bit into it and my fingers hurt. So that's hard for me. I am making my life harder than it needs to be because a lot of these sheepy yarns don't show stitches as well. So I need to go with like bolder patterns, and that sometimes makes me spin my wheels a little longer. But yeah, I love working with the smaller producers. I love working with yarns that are by the women that I know who run their own companies. It just makes me feel good about what I do, I guess.
What's your day looks like? Like how much do you need every day?
Well, it depends. Luckily, I have some flexibility. But what I did get a puppy over COVID. So I have him completely out of my hair on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So those are the days, Tuesdays and Fridays, I get a lot done. Wednesday, because I'm already out of the house, I might do my other errands and stuff. I mean, he's not a child, he can be left alone, and he's asleep over there right now. Like, it's fine. But if I want a long stretch of time where I'm going to get into a math chart and not get out of it for 4 hours, so that'll be a Tuesday, Wednesday, or a Friday. Summer, one of the reasons I do this is for flexibility. So my daughter's home, she's going to be gone in the fall. She'll come up here and be like, hey mom, want to go to the beach? Or hey mom, want to go thrift shopping? And I will put it all down and go. I don't say yes to a lot of deadlines anymore, because I want that. I want, if a person in my life comes up to me, or my friend around the corner wants to go for a walk, like over the last 3 years, I've spent a lot of time alone in this room. And anytime anybody wants to go do something, I want to say yes and get out of this room. So I'm a little less regimented in my schedule than you might think. I do walk the dog, like that thing we do every day in the afternoon and the morning. But there's a lot of hiking over in the fells. There's some woods nearby that we can get lost in for a while. But
I mean, how far ahead do you plan your life? Like, are you already have a schedule for like everything until December of the next year as far as designs go?
So do you see these up here and these over here? So that's kind of my schedule. Those are the yarns that either I have plans for already, or I wish I had plans for, or in a couple of cases, I've talked to the people who make the yarn, and I'm very careful not to actually promise anything by a certain day, because I learned the hard way, like forcing a design is the worst thing I can do. But there's some, like this yarn, this is Blue Poussière from Shani Theoret in Canada. And I got this stuff about 1.5 years ago with a total idea in mind, and it didn't work out. And I've talked to her since, and she's very understanding about the fact that, like, we're going to wait for something else to come up. But I keep taking this and reswatching it, and it's right there, because I do really want to make something in this yarn, and it is on my list of things that I want to get to, but nothing has worked yet. So it lives here. This is the yarn for my Planner's Punch that you were referring to, the red sweater. And since one skein's already been knit, the rest of it's here. This is something that I have from Midwinter Yarns that I'm hoping to get to before the winter is out. This is from Savage Heart Farm, and it's on my radar for later this winter. This is my Rhinebeck purple. That's something that might be coming together. And this is yarn from the Spin Cycle mill that they have no idea I even have swatched an idea for, but I do. And this is living on top of it also from them. So that's kind of my rough schedule. I mean,
like when the idea pops to your head, like what happens? Do you write it down? Do you start sketching it on a piece of paper? Like, how does it work?
All of that. Usually I sketch it, I chart it, and I swatch it. And usually once I'm done with my swatch, I know if I can't put it down, then I want to run with it. And if it's something that I'm struggling with, I'll just, like, it'll be up here or here, and I'll pick it up and put it back down, and pick it up and put it back down. I'll pull out my stitch patterns. I'll put stickies on things. I have files of like photos I've taken and images from magazines that sometimes a little image can spark an idea, even if it doesn't end up being the sweater, you know. I have right now So this was I did a cowl and a hat in this lace, which I absolutely love, for North Bay Fiber, which is Jill Zielinski's new company. And I love this lace so much. It was so much fun to do. And I love her yarn, this heritage worsted. So I'm trying to figure out how to make this lace into a sweater. I haven't been able to reconcile how I want to play with the ribs yet, but like you were asking, see a little drawing just sort of lives there. It's not really what I want to do yet, but the little drawing is like percolating. I guess things are percolating around here. And I used to be much more buttoned up. Like I had a calendar and I had the name of the yarn and I had cardigan, I had this, I had that. But right now, that's just not where my brain is. Right now, I'm sort of following my nose, like Bugs Bunny, and like when he sees the thing he smells. And whenever something works, it works.
Well,
And so,
yeah, do you know what time it is right now? It's 4 o'clock. It's when you start talking about cocktails.
it is.
Is there like a favorite cocktail that you always come back to? Like, do you want to share your favorite recipe?
So in summer, I like beers on ice. It's a weird thing, but it is so good because a beer needs to be really, 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 really cold. I love gin and tonics, and I don't make a gin and tonic with just gin and just tonic and just lime. I always put stuff in it, and it kind of depends on what's in the fridge. I love putting grapefruit in them. I love putting cucumber in them. Cucumber and dill muddled on the bottom is really good. Sometimes I add bitters. Sometimes I add other liqueurs if they're floating around. Like I mess around with my gin and tonics in 1,000 ways. What other things in summer do I really like to drink? I don't know, like it sort of depends. I get this magazine called Imbibe. And every month they have new recipes, and I'll usually like sticky a couple of them. I like things that aren't really sweet. So I tend to do a lot of citrus. I really like bourbon. Bourbon on ice is delicious. Rum and Coke is delicious. I don't know. I haven't been drinking as much this week because of all the COVID in my house.
Right. There's always something.
But yeah, and in winter, what I really want is brown drinks. I love things that involve bourbon, and I like making syrups as well in winter. And there's some really awesome, sort of interesting combinations, like bourbon with cinnamon and pineapple is really good. Yeah, right. You wouldn't have thought it, but it's really good. And there's a local company here called Boston Harbor Distilling that makes a coffee liqueur. And coffee, cinnamon, and bourbon is also really good. The coffee liqueur in your bourbon with the cinnamon and a little orange. I don't know, the same way I'm playing with sweaters right now, I'm just playing with drinks. I actually just bought some sparkling wine because I was watching Paula of Mayak talk about her Aperol spritz. And I really, really want to make, that might be what I drink tonight, is an Aperol spritz, because I bought a little split of sparkling soda so that I could, sparkling wine so that I could make one.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. I'm all over the place. I feel like that's kind of just where I am right now. Like I used to be a lot more regimented about this, and I'm finding that that isn't working for me.
Just part of growing up, you know.
Yeah, or I'm just sort of, I think I'm sort of shaking out to a new place with design, you know, where I'm doing more of just what I want to wear and what makes me inspired and happy on the needles, as opposed to, okay, we need a September, we need an October, we need a November, we need a December. Right. And I think my drinks are doing the same thing. Like I'm not planning them out so much.
Well, I hope you get to meet for some unplanned little get together and share some drinks and some stories of knitting.
Yeah, I'm always in Newton on a Wednesday.
come over.